Alaikum warahmatullah. So today's session is going to be in Urdu. So going to be a combination of Urdu, Hindi and English. If any one of you have any questions, they can always raise their hands and ask. आज का जो सेशन है वो उर्दू, हिंदी और इंग्लिश में होगा because ये एक इंटरव्यू प्रिपरेशन है हमारे एक स्टूडेंट की जो हमारे पास पढ़ रहे हैं. As you can see, एक चीज मैं तुमसे करवाना चाहूंगा and I want you to say that in English and Urdu both. ठीक है ना अली, जब तुम पाकिस्तान से when you went from Pakistan to UK, what were you thinking? Were you thinking that as soon as I complete my degree, I will be able to find a job?
No, Professor, it was not like this. So
no, I mean everyone thinks about that, right? Everyone thinks that as soon as I complete my degree, I'll be able to find a job, right? That's in everyone's mind because I'm studying from the prestigious Royal Holloway University, right?
Yes.
Yes, right. When you're walking in your dorm room in the university or going to attend the class, I mean, even though when you did the degree, it was most probably online because of the COVID-19, right? But you had some sessions at the university. You must be thinking that as I'm walking through these, hallways of the great Royal Holloway University, I will be able to secure a job as soon as I complete my degree, right? I say.
Yes, kind of. Lekin scenario, real scenario, that's totally different.
No. The reason you knew the real scenario was because I already prepared you, right?
Yes.
तुम्हें वो इसलिए because I already prepared you कि तुम्हें पता था कि you already knew कि as soon as I told you that getting a visa doesn't mean you have got the job, right? Getting the student visa means you can do what? You can study there. And after completing your degree, you can get the PSW. But to get the job, which is the, as I'm showing it, this is my pinky finger, to get the job is the most difficult part. Because the university, did the university help you in any way? Let's develop your resume, let's arrange some interviews or call some employers or ask them that these are our great Royal Holloway graduates in MSc in information security and they can help you and hire them. Did university did any of these things?
नहीं फैसल भाई, ये तो आपने भी बात मुझे पहले बताई थी और ये है कि मैंने यहाँ पे
किसी ने नहीं किया ना? नहीं, right?
एग्जीबिशन भी फैसल भाई मैंने अटेंड की थी तो वहां पे भी वो सेम जो है बात उन्होंने की थी. मतलब कंपनी से मैंने डिस्कशन की थी कि मेरे पास ये डिग्री है, मेरे पास ये सर्टिफिकेशंस हैं. So they've told me that we are looking for skills only. We don't want a piece of paper. These are just piece of a paper. So
now this is ये जो तूने बात की, that summarizes how long have you been in UK? 1 year, almost 1.5 years now.
Yes, almost.
So जो तुम्हारा 1.5 year का जो experience है ना, you just summarize the whole 1.5 year experience. तुमने पूरा 1.5 year का experience summarize कर दिया कि डिग्री ले लेने से कुछ नहीं होता भाई, ठीक है ना? Just getting the degree means you have a piece of paper. But when you go in and apply for the job, जब आप market में जाते हो job apply करने के लिए, then the realization hits you, oh, wait a minute. I need basically lots of skills and my experience and everything before I can secure the job, right? This is very important. So इसी के ऊपर हम आज बात करेंगे and that's the key notion जिस पे हम बात करेंगे. इस वक्त 2000 जनवरी से लेकर 2023 जनवरी से लेकर 2023 के जून तक तुम्हें पता है कि उन्होंने कितने वीजे इशू किए हैं?
वर्क परमिट की बात कर रहे हैं भाई?
नहीं, उन्होंने यूके ने वीजे, स्टूडेंट वीजे कितने इशू किए?
11 लाख हैं मेरे ख्याल में.
5 लाख 6 months में, in 6 months 500,000 वीजे उन्होंने इशू किए, राइट? सो व्हाट दे डू इज के वो कैलकुलेशन करते हैं, सब कुछ करते हैं. इन 6 months टाइम, ठीक है ना, फॉर द ईयर एंडिंग जून 2023, बिकॉज ये ईयर एंडिंग की डेट्स वगैरह सब निकालते हैं, दे हैव बेसिकली गिवन स्टूडेंट वीजा ऑलमोस्ट 500,000, यानी कि 500,000 वीजे उन्होंने इशू किए हैं. नाउ दिस रिप्रेजेंट्स, ठीक है ना, बेसिकली जून 2019 के मुकाबले में डबल है, राइट? देख रहे हो ना? 2.5 लाख से 5 लाख हो गया ना, राइट? और अगर देखा जाए तो एयर ओवर एयर एकदम से इंक्रीमेंट हुआ है, और यहाँ से यहाँ जो एयर है वो 23% राइज हुआ है। पिछले साल 2022 में 2022 में दे गेव 400,000 रफली वीजास, 435 सारा नंबर था। एंड नाउ इन 6 months टाइम दिस इज व्हाट दे हैव गिवन। नाउ ये क्या करते हैं, दे ऑलवेज मेजर लाइक दिस इज अ 1 year टाइम, राइट? दे ऑलवेज मेजर 12 months में कितने, क्योंकि इनका एयर स्टार्ट होता है जून से और एंड होता है जून पे, राइट? सो अभी इस साल के लिए अभी भी इनके पास टाइम है। सो रफली अगर देखा जाए दे विल बी इशूइंग मोर वीजास, राइट? सो अगर हम ऐड करें कि कितने हैं नाउ एयर ओवर एयर ऑन एवरेज यूके में इस वक्त तकरीबन 25 से 30 लाख स्टूडेंट्स बैठे हुए हैं, राइट? 25 से 30 लाख। और जिन लोगों को उन्होंने पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट वर्क परमिट इशू किया है वो एक बहुत बड़ा नंबर है। सो UK is still the king when it comes to student visa. Student visa लेना बहुत आसान है, लेकिन उसके बाद फिर जॉब पकड़ना इज द नेक्स्ट चैलेंज। सो आज मैंने इनवाइट किया था मोहम्मद उस्मान को कि अगर वो आ जाए हमें बताए, जैसे वो जर्मनी गया, माशाल्लाह उसकी जॉब हो गई है, बट ही कुडंट जॉइन अस बिकॉज वो बेचारा अभी तक अपनी ना जगह का बंदोबस्त कर रहा है, अपनी रिहाइश का बंदोबस्त कर रहा है। सो आज हमारे साथ अली हैं जिनको हम प्रिपरेशन करा रहे हैं। सो टुडे वी हैव अली हु इज गोइंग थ्रू द इंटरव्यू प्रिपरेशन। सो तुम्हारी जो जॉब है मैंने यहाँ देखी है, ये प्योरली जो है ना रिलेटेड है GRC, गवर्नेंस रिस्क एंड कंप्लायंस। इसमें टोटल जो काम है वो GRC का काम है, देयर इज नथिंग एल्स, ठीक है? इसमें जो उनको बंदा चाहिए उसका काम क्या है कि वो बेसिकली जो है ना उनके जो भी IT और OT के जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है उसको वो लोग सिक्योर एंड कंप्लायंट बनाए, दैट्स इट, ठीक है ना? देयर इज नथिंग एल्स, और उसके ऊपर कोई उनका वो नहीं है। सो तुम्हारे पास एक बहुत अच्छा मौका है बिकॉज तुमने डिप्लोमा इन क्लाउड, पहले कैट पढ़ा, फिर डिप्लोमा इन क्लाउड साइबर सिक्योरिटी में गए, तुम्हें डेवऑप्स दिया, तुमने दूसरी चीजें सब पढ़ी। तो कीप दिस इन माइंड कि IT का जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है वो इनका क्लाउड में होगा, ठीक है ना? OT का इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के कंपोनेंट्स होंगे क्लाउड में, सारा क्लाउड में नहीं होगा क्योंकि इसका जो रोल है वो OT के ऊपर है, मगर OT ऑल्सो कनेक्ट्स टू द क्लाउड इन सम वे और द अदर, ठीक है? मैं यहाँ से शेयर करता हूँ बेसिकली रोल, इट्स ओके, आई मीन तुम इसके ऊपर जाओगे करोगे। मैं रोल शेयर करके तुमको बता देता हूँ। ये जो रोल है इसमें इन्होंने बहुत सारी चीजें बताई हैं, और जो बता रहे हैं कि तुम रिस्पॉन्सिबल हो कंटिन्यूस इंप्रूवमेंट फॉर ISO 27001 बेस्ड इंफॉर्मेशन सिक्योरिटी मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम। व्हाट दिस मींस इज कि उन्होंने ऑलरेडी ISMS इंप्लीमेंट किया हुआ है, ठीक है? तो ISMS की इंप्लीमेंटेशन की कौन कौन सी पॉलिसीज हैं, तुमसे ये पूछ सकते हैं, तुमने कौन कौन सी पॉलिसीज के ऊपर कंप्लाइंट काम किया है, तुमसे ये पूछ सकते हैं। तुमसे ये पूछ सकते हैं कि भाई तुम ना किस तरह से नेगोशिएट करोगे, किस तरह से क्या काम करोगे, क्या नहीं करोगे, ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, ठीक है? तो हम इसके ऊपर बात करेंगे। और तुमने एक बड़ी अच्छी चीज बताई अली, स्टार मेथोडोलॉजी, राइट? सो व्हाट डज स्टार सेज? स्टार मेथोडोलॉजी क्या है कि स्टार मेथोडोलॉजी बताती है, लेट मी ओपन दैट एक्रोनिम बिकॉज इट टॉक्स अबाउट सिचुएशन एंड tasks, actions, and then R is
results,
right? तो हम इसी मेथोडोलॉजी को रख के बात करेंगे कि this was the situation I was in, this was the task I performed, these were the actions I took, and or whatever I did, and the result was this, right? So इसके लिए मैंने तुम्हें कुछ चीजें भेजी थी, I'm going to open that and I'm going to talk about in the same way. So तुमसे पूछ सकते हैं कि भाई एक्सप्लेन टू मी, ठीक है ना? जो तुमसे पहला सवाल हो सकता है कि भाई एक्सप्लेन टू मी बेसिकली, वेयर इज इट, यस, how basically how can we perform continuous improvement of ISO 27001, right? So तुम बता सकते हो कि at my previous company, because you already worked here, ठीक है ना, I had to implement ISO 27001 systems, ठीक है ना? That was roughly like some time ago, ये बोलना, ठीक है? But there were challenges in updating and maintaining the systems to adapt to changing businesses and security needs. I mean, business requirements keep on changing, and compliance requirements are still standing there. And then it becomes very difficult because the network keeps on expanding. There was a lot of things that were different. For example, the IT, and I was given the role for IT and OT both, right? So the IT network, if I look, and we were, basically we were using IEC 62443 to segment the network. Okay. We were using IEC 62443 to segment the network because the segmentation is something that is mentioned clearly in a defined manner in IEC 62443 as compared to 27,000. 27,000 is a generic standard, right? But we had to get the company certified with respect to IEC 62443, not the certification, but the implementation. But my role was to ensure that I'm looking into basically utilizing the 27,001 standard and IEC 62443 both at the same time, right? So the first thing I had to do was basically identify the business requirements. The business requirements, it was an electrical grid in this manner. It was an electrical grid. So not in renewable energy, but an electrical grid. And the way that they were, they were using conventional methodologies to generate electricity, right? Which is primarily burning fuel, right? So my role was to ensure that the IT network which is under the scope needs to be defined. This is the IT network. Where are the web servers, the app servers, the database servers, different mail servers, exchange servers, all of these different servers, right? अली, तुमने इसी तरीके से बात करनी है जिससे तुम विजुलाइज करके बता रहे हो, ठीक है ना अली? तुम्हारे पास टाइम है, कब है तुम्हारा इंटरव्यू? 11 को है ना? तुमने इसी तरह प्रैक्टिस करनी है. ओके, दिस इज द सेम वे यू हैव टू प्रैक्टिस. देखो उस्मान जो है ना, उसने सिक्योर कर ली काम, उसने अपना जॉब सिक्योर कर ली. सो यू हैव टू यूज द सेम मेथोडोलॉजी, राइट? एंड देन दिस वाज द टॉप लेयर. At the bottom we had the OT. Now the OT network was a bit different, right? Because OT networks are a bit different. And मैं तुम्हें diagram दिखाता हूँ. And one of the challenges we had was basically, segmenting the network into levels, right? So we had to define the levels. And this was the difficult part because, you have to pin down the levels. And you have to carve out the network at the switching level, at the routing level, at the firewall level. All of these levels needs to be defined. So we defined zones. Level 0 was, the sensors, the drivers, and some other processes. The robotic process automation parts were there. There were some things that we had to place in there. Above level 0, it was level 1, which was, the discrete controls, the drive controls, the continuous process controls, the safety controls, the sys systems, right? The safety instrumentation systems, and there were many other systems. My role was not to manage these systems. My role was to identify these systems, perform a risk assessment, and basically explain this to the network team, how they have to define the network, how they have to carve out the network. Isolation, right? There is no need for us to open level 0, 1, 2, 3 different levels of OT, which we were calling in the industrial zones, right? And the enterprise zone was the IT. So the IT network was in the enterprise zone. And at the bottom, we had basically the industrial zone, which was the OT. So my role was to ensure that we were using zero trust model, that by default, everything should be disabled. That's how we approached the situation. And we were using Purdue reference model to do that, the classic Purdue reference model, right? And essentially, if you look at it carefully, it does talks about zero trust in a generic way, but we implemented zero trust model in there. So each layer was divided into levels, level 0, 1, 2, 3. 4 and 5 was basically the enterprise level, right? And we use essentially the IEC 62443 and ISO 27001 and merge them together into a unified risk and governance, risk and compliance framework so that it is easier for us to manage these things. Okay, ये तुमने explain करना है. And there were different, basically, तुम इसमें बताओगे, there were different, basically networks. There were different segmented zones. There were different suppliers. There were, the prominent IT, OT vendors were Rockwell Automation was there, Schneider, ABB, Honeywell, Process Solutions were there, Emerson, GE, Siemens, Bosch, different ones. And then on the IT layer, we had some, some of the cloud services from AWS. And it was a hybrid cloud. We had some Azure. We also had, the physical stack was there. We had the physical data center as there as well. So there was some Dell and HP equipment. There was a lot of Dell and HP equipment at the data centers. ERP was Siemens, coming from Siemens, from SAP, basically, right? So there was a range of things in there. There was a range of things. In the midst of all of these technology parts, my role was to ensure that I create an effective strategy to identify the scope, because I had to identify the scope, because you can't blanketly implement everything of 27001 or IC 62443 throughout the organization. You can't do that. It's not possible. You will be setting up yourself for failure. So my role was to ensure that, I identify all the parts and the task I was given. So that was my situation. The task was, spearheading the ongoing optimization of these systems and ensuring that they have the right policies, the procedures, all the risks are identified in the risk assessments. Then I go in and meet different process owners to close the gaps, how we can close the gaps. It took me 2 years to get this thing done, right? Almost like 18 months, not 2 years, 18 months, right? So, but this was a continuous process. We had to do this for different customers, for different clients, because I was working for a consulting company. So I'm here with this customer, then I'm there with that customer, then I'm there with that customer, right? When you're working internally for one customer, then morning, day, night, like whether it's morning or night or whatever the case is, sunshine or rain, you're just working for one customer. That makes it much more easier. But again, the scope becomes, bigger, because if that company has different presence in different countries, right? So that makes it much more difficult. So if I see the role, whatever I have done at Al-Nafi Cloud, I'll be doing the same thing here, but instead of customers, visiting different customers, I'll be doing it in different countries, right? For the same customer. And then the action was, I initiated like quarterly review meetings. Some of them were monthly meetings. The urgent one was, fortnightly meetings every 15 days. Basically informing the process owners about the gaps, getting some timeline from them, putting the timelines there, pursuing them again via email, messages, meetings, the closure of those gaps. It took us time. And I liaison with different offices for different customers, how to do all of those things. The result was over a year, after 12 months, we saw, significant, like 25 to 30% reduction in security incidents. And all the satellite offices were brought up to the same standard. All the different location, all the satellite locations, different location of the customers, of this electrical power grids and different customers, because I'm talking about, we were working on different customers from different industry zones. But primarily, yes, electrical IEC 62443 is utilized more by, and the 27019, which utilizes 27001 for securing and safeguarding the critical aspects of electrical grid, right? So we were utilizing all of that. So it's in a combination, what I did was I created a framework which was utilizing 27001, 27017, 27018 for cloud security and cloud privacy, 27019 for protecting electrical grids, from these different attacks. Because during that time, we're looking at news and we're looking at different things. Critical infrastructure is the prime target for hackers and state and non-state actors. So implementing 27001 and reducing the security incidents down to a threshold for of 20 to 30%, it's a good achievement, right? It takes time, it takes energy, it takes a lot of basically negotiation and diplomacy, because it's like you're working at United Nations, right? And these different departments at different countries, everyone has their own interests. So you have to work with them and create a strategy that fulfills the company core business objectives, and at the same time, the company compliance objectives, right? So the core objectives drives the compliance and security controls. The security and compliance control doesn't drive this, right? So that's how you have to explain. We were also doing supplier security audits. So agar unhone pucha ke how do you perform supplier security audits, right? To tum usme bataoge. Again, there was a lot of third-party suppliers for IT, for OT, for different components. There was let me open the standard, because as I was telling you, I'm going to send you a copy of the standard, inshallah. Okay, I'm going to scan it and send it to you. This is we were utilizing ISO 27036, section 1 of the standard. The supplier part was divided into 5 critical aspects. Infrastructure as a service for IT, information and communication technology for IT and OT both, whatever we are acquiring or getting. Platform as a service, some of the OT components were platform as a service from different vendors. And also for cloud technologies as well. Research and development, there was a lot of research and development going on. And software as a service or application as a service. There was a lot of things. So we have to identify all the key aspects and basically go in and try to understand what are the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, what is the upstream of the suppliers, what is the downstream going down to the consumer. If we have 3 suppliers, we'll shortlist, or 4 suppliers, we'll shortlist 2 of them. Then that's tier 2, then we will move them to tier 1. And then once they pass the audit, we had a checklist to confirm. Then we will go towards basically acquiring, selecting that supplier and then acquiring components, hardware, software, application, services, whatever we want to do from that supplier, so that it can go downstream to the customers, right? And to the end customer, to the consumer. So that's the kind of process we followed. There's a lot of things, that we have seen that we have to take care that whatever we're getting from the supplier, it is secure and compliant, or they have good business practices. Sometimes we'll ask for SAS 70 reports, type 1, type 2, or SSAE 16 as we call it, right? We will ask them to see or demonstrate their governance in, processes. We will try to locate and identify geographical, social, and cultural differences between the suppliers and us. Create some key aspects in terms of like miscommunication and understanding. So we need to have controls in place to address the risks identified by the acquirer, whoever the supplier is, leaving the acquirer vulnerable to risk presumed to be addressed and managed by the supplier. We have to make sure that if you're getting something from this supplier, which is in Africa or somewhere else, then the geographical, social, and cultural differences, what will happen? So for example, if the supplier is based in Africa and there's a military coup or whatever is happening, the social or the political situation is changing, that can impact us. We don't want to be in that situation. So when we are performing supplier chain management audits, we will not only look at them from the security aspects, but the whole GRCS, whatever governance we can utilize, whatever risks we can identify, not only from the IT perspective, but also from the general business perspective as well. And then the compliance, right? What are they compliant to? So most of these things can be identified, and that's what we were doing. So we had a risk scoring developed, by the risk team, and I was working closely with the risk team to identify. So give you an example, our company, one of our clients relied heavily on a third-party supplier, but there was no standard procedures to evaluate the security controls of the supplier. I mean, how are they providing us all the OT components? Are they testing all those OT components? What are the, are they using MSTG? If it has mobile components. So for example, if it's an OT equipment, if it can be connected via mobile phone, then we need to test controls like using mobile security testing guide, MSTG, which is a standard for testing mobile applications or anything that can be remotely connected to a mobile phone. We need to test that. If it's a process where these OT components can be connected to the web, to the internet, if it has a web interface, then we had to ask the supplier, how are you guys utilizing OWASP or WSTG, web security testing guide procedures, the best practices to test your application? Please provide us a report. Internal scans, external scans, vulnerability scans, penetration testing reports, all of these kind of things. If it has a firmware component, and most of the OT, whatever supplies you get, everyone has a different firmware. GE has a different firmware. Emerson has a different firmware. Honeywell has a different firmware. Bosch has a different firmware. Schneider, Rockwell Automation, all of these companies, they use different firmwares. They use a standard, yes, but the firmwares are different. They run on Linux most of the time, right? And that's what we have seen. Sometimes it runs on Windows. It depends on the operating system. How are they testing out that firmware? How is that firmware being tested? For that, we were mandating everyone to use FSTG, Firmware Security Testing Guide. That's a separate process to test and validate, because we don't want to be in a situation where the OT components are compromised through the web interface. Someone comes in, or through the mobile interface, they comes in, and then they exploit the firmware of the OT layer, and then that whole layer is compromised, right? So we don't want to have that. So that was another thing. So I had to, my task was to lead this assessment, focusing on the key parts of 27001 and IC 62443, and using the best practices of WSTG, Web Security Testing Guide, Mobile Security Testing Guide, Firmware Security Testing Guide. These are the three components, and also using Mitre attack, because Mitre attack gives you a full blueprint of how to test and verify all the key things as it relates to ICS, Industry Control Systems. Now, Ali bhai, जो मैंने तुम्हें सारी बातें की है ना, ये सारी डिप्लोमा इन क्लाउड साइबर सिक्योरिटी पढ़ाई है, टेस्ट लैब भी दी है, और इसका जो आगे का सारा जो काम है ना, वो ऑफेंसिव में हमने सारा तुम्हें करवाया, ठीक है ना? So as I said, कि तुम लोगों को ये जो चीजें है ना, ये पढ़ते रहना पड़ेगा, कि भाई पढ़ते रहो. I mean, पढ़ाई तुम रोक नहीं सकते. You can't stop it. So if I go online और मैं तुम्हें दिखाऊं, तो ये सारी की सारी जो चीजें जो मैंने तुमको बताई हैं, ये सारी चीजें मैंने कोर्सेज डिजाइन की हैं. तुम इसमें आओ कैटेगरीज के अंदर, ठीक है, और ऑफेंसिव में जाओ, ऑफेंसिव साइबर सिक्योरिटी के अंदर, you'll be able to see offensive, तो सर्टिफिकेट इन ऑफेंसिव साइबर सिक्योरिटी या ऑफेंसिव साइबर व्हाटएवर, राइट, एडवांस सर्टिफिकेट, इसके अंदर तुम्हें मुख्तलिफ चीजें पढ़ाई जा रही हैं. उसमें हमने तुम्हें पूरा माइटर अटैक करवा दिया है, द होल माइटर अटैक, राइट, द होल माइटर अटैक हैज ऑलरेडी, देखो ये माइटर अटैक पार्ट 1 और माइटर अटैक पार्ट 2, ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, माइटर अटैक पार्ट 3, iOS के टूल्स कैसे करना है, एंड्रॉयड के टूल्स ये MSTG है, ठीक है ना, ये सारी की सारी चीजें हम तुम्हें उसमें करवा चुके हैं। और इसी माइटर अटैक के अंदर ही, ठीक है ना, द सेम माइटर अटैक कवर्स, अगर तुम इस पे जाओ यू विल बी एबल टू सी कि ये जो माइटर अटैक है इसी के अंदर पूरी जो टेक्निक्स आती हैं वो ICS की पूरी हमने कवर की है। All of these things are covered: initial access, execution, persistence. So this is all OT. This is all OT testing. This is all OT. So when it comes to OT, that's what I'm not going to ask you to start learning these right now for your interview. No, your interview is there, but this is a GRC role. So when you're leading a GRC role, you need to make sure that you understand these things and you ask basically, and when you're going through the interview, you explain to them, like the ICS matrix, industrial control systems need to be tested from the initial access point, execution, persistence. There's a long list of things that we have to go through, right? I can go through them in detail, but if you guys want to know, I'm not going to bore you with the details, right? The other thing was collaborating with the IT and software team. The action was I had to collaborate with IT and software teams and hardware teams and engineering departments, and initiate a deep dive into our current applications, all the OT applications, OT hardware, everything. And we use penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, and process evaluation, right? Each potential risk was documented and was graded, was ranked, and solutions were proposed. And then my job was also to go in and pursue them until that gap is closed. And that's what my role was: governance, risk, and compliance. And the results was we identified 15 critical vulnerabilities, addressed them in the subsequent months, took us some time. This significantly bolstered our company defense against cyber attacks, right? So we were able to identify those things. And what we also did was we created choke points, jump boxes for each of these different layers of OT. So level 0, 1, 2, 3, as I said, in 4 layers, we defined the OT systems. Where are we going to place the PLCs? We're going to place the HMIs, the other OT components, or distributed control systems. All of these things were placed, and there were jump boxes. So if any engineer wants to access them, they can't come from the outside through VPN. No, they have to jump on a box through a VPN, and that box is only allowed to go in and talk to those specific layers where they want to do something, right? So I had to do all of these things, obviously with the collaboration. So we did that as well. And I believe that in the same role, I've seen that you have mentioned that that's exactly what you guys are also looking for as well, right? You guys are looking for a person who can do all of these things. OD audits. You support on delivering and reporting on the status of all OT audit recommendations. So yeah, absolutely. I don't see the name of IEC 62443 here. It's fine, but at the same time, if it's 27001, it's the same thing, right? One of the things tum bata sakte ho. Just give me 1 minute, okay? एक मिनट आता हूं. तो एक चीज तुम उनको बता सकते हो, industrial controls and communications के लिए ना, I mean, don't emphasize too much, Ali, on many things, because I don't want you to be in a situation कि ना वो जो बंदा तुम्हारा इंटरव्यू ले रहा है ना, he gets मतलब कि अनप्लेजेंट हो जाए. समझ रहे हो ना मेरी बात ना? बोले यार ये तो मतलब कि ना ऊपर से आ रहा है, राइट? सो यू कांट डू दैट. सो बताना है कि भाई, if given the opportunity, I will utilize 27001, but I would also recommend that we look into for the OT aspects specifically, we should look into IEC 62443 because it is designed for OT specific. It addresses all the unique risks. It creates safety and reliability, It is designed on the same defense in depth, similar to 27001, but customized for ICS, for electrical grids. The harmonization of practices are also achieved. Again, whatever is there in 27001, it has that and plus more, right? Vendor and product certifications. We were also asking for all the OT vendors who were providing us solutions to ask them, do you have, does your product is compliant to IEC 62443 or not? Because that is exactly what each and every OT vendor utilizes from different certification standards. They utilize this standard to certify their product, right? For the electrical grids, it exceeds the regulatory compliance requirements. So if we follow that, as a byproduct, we will be fully secure. And we will be future-proofing our network and our challenges, because many challenges are coming. One of the biggest risks that we have nowadays is that people are training Llama 2, which is an AI model, AI operating system. They are using Llama 2. They're training it, these hackers, to launch attacks on critical infrastructure. And critical infrastructure has too many components, too many weaknesses, too many loopholes which can be exploited. So we have to come up with a solution to plug those gaps. So future-proofing, we can get that. And stakeholder confidence, that will also bring in a lot of stakeholder confidence from your side, that you will know, yes, we have a great team, because this is a team effort. This is not a one-man's job. You need to build consensus. And as I said, it's like working at United Nations. Different countries have different objectives. Similarly, different departments, they have different objectives. All have different business objectives. We need to align all of them towards common security goals. That's what exactly what, for the global, at the United Nations, it's for the global good. And this company, if given the opportunity, it's for meeting the business objectives. And the business objective is to keep on continuously providing services to our consumers, right? Right, Ali? This also provides us a holistic security approach as well, right? So not just focusing on the technical measures, but also emphasizing on organizational and procedural aspects as well. So looking at all the policies and procedures and all the things, right? So that would be something, I'm sure that you guys are already doing it, or you guys might be planning to do it, but that is something that, we should consider. Apart from that, उसका एक और सवाल अगर जो तुमसे पूछ सकते हैं, ठीक है ना? Presentation to stakeholders. तुम कोई सवाल पूछो भाई, इससे पहले मैं आगे जाऊं. I mean, do you have any further questions?
Yes, Faisal bhai, I have a few questions from you. What things would be considered for developing a framework, and basically how would you develop an OT framework?
So the first thing is business requirements. What are our business requirements? What are our business objectives? Second thing is people. What are our people who are involved? The processes that we have and the technological components. If we identify these four aspects, the business requirements, because the business requirements will dictate the security and compliance requirements. The people aspects will dictate who is doing what, who is responsible. The policies and procedures, the processes, they need to be there so that we know exactly, we have everything covered. And then the technology aspects, all the OT parts, and if you throw in IT parts, right? All of these things. So these are four aspects. We consider them, and then we design a framework. And then when we're designing the framework, the technical controls we can take it from, and the managerial controls and other controls we can borrow it from 27001, which is a generic information security standard. We can use specific OT standard for security, IEC 62443. We can use supplier standard 27036 for supplier assessment, whatever services we're getting from the suppliers, because we are in the business of creating, providing power to our consumers. We're not in the business of creating systems, right? So we need to have connection with different suppliers. Then it comes basically all these aspects, they play a role. And then for cloud, 27,017, 18 for electrical grids, 27,019. So all of these things needs to be taken into consideration before we go in and venture into the aspects of developing a framework, And the business requirements, the first one I said, they are the stakeholder requirements. They always dictate what we do, and then people, processes, and technology. And the remaining parts, they all fall in, and that's how we design, right? देखो ये जो company है ना, ये बहुत बड़ी company है. This is a huge company, ठीक है? RW is a leading renewable, growing green by investing more than 50 billion euros gross by 2030. I mean, तुम्हें शायद पता नहीं है कि बहुत सारी जगहों के ऊपर globally mandate आ गया है कि they have to by 2030 तक तमाम जो इलेक्ट्रिक जो गाड़ियां हैं, जितनी गाड़ियां बन रही हैं, everything needs to be electric, right? So there's a lot of push towards renewable, right? Because of that push, 2030 में पूरे यूरोपियन यूनियन में और G20 कंट्रीज के अंदर जो बड़ी यूरोपियन कंट्रीज हैं, USA, कनाडा, और जो यूरोपियन कंट्रीज हैं और जो एशिया पैसिफिक, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, न्यूजीलैंड है, they will stop making electrical cars. So there's a lot of push towards that, and that's why this is a big company. ये Fortune 500 companies में आती है ना, दुनिया के top 500 companies में, right? Right? तो you have to look into all of those things. तुम्हें देखना पड़ेगा. ठीक है? और सवाल पूछो भाई. तुम सवाल पूछो. मैंने तुम्हें सारे मोटी-मोटी चीजें बता दी.
जी, फैसल भाई, regarding regulatory compliance, like which regulatory frameworks we were following previously?
In the US, for the US client, we were using NARIC, okay, for the electrical powers, and IC 62443. IC 62443 is not a regulatory compliance standard. It's best practices. But pretty much all the regulators, they want you to follow that as a best practice, right? But there were some specific standards. NERC was one of them because all the clients I worked with basically were North American customers. So, I can say that. But regulatory compliance standards for electrical grid, cybersecurity, right? In EU, I can see that. मैं देख लेता हूँ कौन से हैं. That will give me an idea कि European में जो ना regulatory compliance standards कौन से हैं. The NIST directive है. I mean, there's a NIST directive, which is very relevant to compliance. The European Program for Critical Infrastructure Protection, EPCIP. The General Data Protection, GDPR, which comes in, it applies to everyone. Everyone needs to follow that, because your aim is to make sure that the breach doesn't leak the data of the customers. I've reviewed all of these things, and pretty much like the NIST directive, the EPCIP, the European Program for Critical Infrastructure Protection, the GDPR, the Cybersecurity Act, which was passed in EU in June 2019, and the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. I mean, all of these legislative and regulatory requirements, they pretty much comply and pretty much map to 27,001, 27,017, 27,018, 27,019, and IC 62443. And these are the standards I've worked with in North America. For the Europeans, it's the same thing. It would be fair to say, and I might be wrong, but whatever the Americans create, the Europeans follow. But sometimes the Europeans, they make it much better. So the Americans, they created Ford, right? The Europeans, they created Porsche, right? So you can imagine whatever Europeans do, they make it much better, right? The Americans, they come up with something, and then the Europeans, they will follow the lead and they will make it much better. So all of these standards, they pretty much comply with the same standards as the US standards. और पूछो.
अच्छा फैसल भाई, कॉमन क्वेश्चन पूछते हैं हमेशा से ओटी की पोजीशन में कि क्या आईटी कंट्रोल्स ओटी पे अप्लाई कर सकते हैं? अ, कोई एग्जांपल दें बेस्ट कंट्रोल्स के क्या डिफरेंस है आईटी और ओटी कंट्रोल्स में?
देखो मैंने बहुत दफा एग्जांपल दिए तुम लोगों को, ठीक है ना। IT and OT controls, they do share similar controls. IT and OT infrastructure. If OT has a web component, it needs to be secured in the same way as the IT, because IT will always have a web component, pretty much, right? If OT requires access control, then there is always an access control in IT. So there are some common controls that you will see in IT or OT. The network controls, like IDS, IPS, firewalls. I mean, the firewalls for OT are different, slightly different as compared to the deep packet inspection firewalls of IT. The IDS, IPS are still the same. The networking attacks are still the same. The access control requirements are still the same. I mean, the identity access management in OT and the identity access management in IT are different, but different systems, but they behave similar in similar fashion. You need to secure and perform pen testing in OT. You need to do the same thing in IT, right? So the networking controls, the security controls, the penetration testing controls, the scanning controls, all of those things are similar. However, there are subtle differences. If you want to perform scanning in IT, we can go in and we can do full throttle scanning or whatever we want to do. In OT, these systems are live, they are running, and they are running the whole plant. So we can't just go in and just perform complete scan of on full threshold for all the OT components. That will just bring down the whole system. We can't do that. The segmentation part for the IT and OT is still the same. You have to segment the network in IT, you have to segment the network in OT. So you can say, this is IT, this is OT. They all use similar controls. You can create DMZ here, you can create DMZs there. You can create segmentation. You need to have segmentation here, you have segmentation there. It is best to implement zero trust model in OT, same like in IT, right? So all of these controls are similar, the policies. That is why you're using 27001, which is essentially an IT security standard on OT, right? ऐसा ही है ना? तुमने देखा है? 27, what is 27001? 27001, अगर तुम उससे पूछो ना, AI से पूछो कि भाई, what is the difference between 27001 and IC 62443? तुम्हें एक बड़ा अच्छा जवाब देगा. I mean, it's a very interesting answer. So if you look at the answer, you know, मैंने इसको पहले कहा, show me the differences in this and this. So you will see, because you need to understand कि सवाल क्या पूछना है. देखो, इसने बोला हुआ है, this is a globally recognized standard for establishing and implementing, maintaining and improving an information security management system within any kind of organization. Aims to protect confidentiality, integrity, availability of information. Scope applicable to any organization regardless of its size, paper or digital tapes or kuch bhi ho, doesn't matter. Components, 114 controls, 14 groups, risk management process is required, falana, falana, falana. Certification hoti hai iske upar. ये इंडस्ट्रियल कम्युनिकेशन नेटवर्क एंड सिक्योरिटी का स्टैंडर्ड है. पर्पस क्या है? फोकस इज स्पेसिफिकली on the security of industrial control systems and operational technology OT environments. You see, this is designed for OT. 27001 is not. That's the generic standard actually. And aim kya hai? Aim to address the unique requirements of security in industrial settings where uptime, reliability and safety are of paramount importance. Right? यही है ना? इलेक्ट्रिकल ग्रिड बैठ तो नहीं सकती ना. अब ये कराची तो नहीं है ना कि केसी की तरह बिजली बंद हो जाएगी, राइट?
सही है.
ठीक है ना?
सही है.
ठीक है ना? सो यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट टू से. इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूं मुझसे सवाल करो, क्योंकि तुमने बहुत इंटरव्यूज दिए हैं ना अभी. डिजाइन फॉर इंडस्ट्रीज सच एज एनर्जी, ऑटोमोटिव, केमिकल प्लांट्स, पावर जनरेशन एंड अदर क्रिटिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर्स. देखो ये डिजाइंड है. दैट्स व्हाई आई एम सरप्राइज कि इन्होंने कहीं लिखा नहीं उसका. इसलिए मैं क्या कर रहा था, मैं इसकी जॉब सर्च पे जाकर मैं लिखना चाह रहा था कि भाई मतलब कि ना कुछ मुझे बताओ. 560 जॉब्स हैं इनके पास, ठीक है ना? तो मैं जरा देखूं तो सही कि भाई क्या कर रहे हैं ये लोग, ठीक है ना? लेकिन उसमें इन्होंने वो नहीं दिया हुआ, कंट्रोलर, सीनियर काउंसिल, क्रेडिट रिस्क, ये सब इन्होंने ध्यान में, मगर इन्होंने पता नहीं क्लाउड का डाला है कि नहीं डाला, मतलब कि कोई सर्च का कॉलम नहीं दिया ना। ठीक है, मैं यहाँ पर अगर जाऊँ, कंसल्टिंग करूँ, मुझे वो दिखाओ, इंजीनियरिंग करूँ, मुझे वो दिखाओ, और आईटी डिजिटल इसको दिखाओ। ठीक है ना, देखो कितना सारे इनके डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं, पावर प्लांट्स हैं, ठीक है, इसको दिखाओ, प्रोक्योरमेंट है, प्रोजेक्ट मैनेजमेंट है, सेल्स, मार्केटिंग, और सारे डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं। सो सच वो कह रहा है रजिस्टर भी हो जाओ, रजिस्टर होने का तो टाइम नहीं है मेरे पास, बट देखो यहाँ पर इसने दिखा दिया। ठीक है, कुछ कुछ दिखा रहा है, इलेक्ट्रिकल इंजीनियर्स, टीम लीड, साइट ऑन बोर्डिंग, फलाना फलाना फलाना। ठीक है, सो ये दिखा रहा है जॉब्स, आई मीन इट इज शोइंग दैट। मैं इसको हटा देता हूँ यहाँ से, पावर प्लांट्स को हटा देता हूँ। ठीक है ना, सो डेटा गवर्नेंस लीड, टीम लीड, कंसल्टेंट, ये सब लिखा हुआ है इन्होंने। सो इट्स द सेम थिंग। ठीक है, मतलब कि सैप भी, ये लोग सैप इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं। डेटा गवर्नेंस लीड में जाके हम जरा देखेंगे क्या कर रहे हैं लोग, वेरियस लोकेशंस। मैं हैरत है मुझे कि ना वो IC 62443 इंप्लीमेंट नहीं कर रहे, इसलिए तुम्हें ना बड़े आराम से बोलना है, ऐसा ना हो कि जो इंटरव्यू ले रहा हूँ बोले यार ये इसको तो बहुत काम आता है, ऐसा ना हो मेरे लिए मुसीबत हो जाएगी। समझ रहे हो? ठीक है, तो वो
ठीक है,
तंग नहीं
समझ गया।
करेंगे। हाँ, तो यू हैव टू बी, तुम देखना कि भाई वो जो बंदा है वो तुमसे कैसे बात करता है, क्या करता है, बोलो भाई मेरी रिकमेंडेशन, मैं रिकमेंडेशन दे सकता हूँ। आई मीन आई एम जस्ट अ मैसेंजर। द पोजीशन इज ऑफ अ मैसेंजर, राइट? द पोजीशन इज, पोजीशन क्या है तुम्हारी, व्हाट इज द पोजीशन? OT साइबर सिक्योरिटी कंसल्टेंट,
गवर्नर।
specialist, right? Or cyber OT, cyber governance, risk and compliance specialist. So my role is acting as a, basically as a messenger. Don't shoot the messenger, right? इस तरह करके बात करो, be careful. ठीक है, और सवाल पूछो।
फैसल भाई, रिगार्डिंग द स्कोप, स्कोप आपने बात की थी, तो अ, ये आता है कि ओटी जो है हमेशा एसेट्स जो है वो, प्लांट्स जो है वो काफी वास्ट होते हैं। तो जो मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, तो हाई लेवल रिस्क असेसमेंट जो आपने पढ़ाया हुआ है हमें, तो उसके थ्रू हम जो है क्रिटिकल प्रोसेसेस और क्रिटिकल एसेट्स आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हैं। फिर उसके बाद जब जो आइडेंटिफाई कर लेंगे, उसके बाद फिर हम लो लेवल रिस्क असेसमेंट पे आते हैं, जिसमें वल्नरेबिलिटी असेसमेंट्स और पेनिट्रेशन टेस्टिंग या जो भी सारे मैनुअल टेस्टिंग है वो हम करते हैं उसमें। तो ये सही है फैसल भाई कि मतलब अगर वो स्कोपिंग के बारे में पूछते हैं कि किस तरह स्कोपिंग करोगे, तो मतलब मेरे जहन में तो ये आंसर आ रहा है कि हाई लेवल रिस्क असेसमेंट से ही
भाई
स्कोपिंग
स्कोपिंग के लिए
का
द
पता।
बेस्ट थिंग इज, if you ask me to do the scoping, I really would like to know, basically it starts with the business requirements, the people, the processes, and the technology. I need to know about these 4 areas. And then I will look into the network diagrams, the operational diagrams, the high level network diagrams, the low level network designs, documents, many things, and try to understand and use the past risk assessment reports to see where do we have to look for, what do we have to look for, what are the key components. If this component goes down, what is the mean time between failure, mean time to repair, all of these different variables. I have to look into all of those things. Then I can determine what is my scope, because I will always try to box in my scope so that it's easier for me to do things, and then slowly, increase the scope. Because if I start here, I will never be able to finish. So we always try to box in the scope. The scope is defined. This is our scope. This is our area where we're going to work, and then slowly and gradually we grow up, right? It's like conquering, like a country. You start with one territory, you piece up, you keep on moving forward, you establish your standards, and you keep on moving, right, forward. That's what we have to do. I can't just go in and start implementing everything. It's not something
फैसल
I can
भाई,
do.
निस्ट की जो गाइडलाइन है और 62443 की जो गाइडलाइन है उसके मुताबिक मैंने थोड़ा पढ़ा हुआ है, तो उसमें वो कहते हैं कि मल्टीपल फैक्टर्स आपको देखने पड़ते हैं कि जो है आइदर एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स भी कंसीडर करने पड़ते हैं कि कोई
Everything.
प्लांट है तो हाँ उस पे अगर कोई
Those are
प्लांट है
business. Those are business requirements. I mean, the business requirements बोलेंगे कि भाई this plant needs to run all the time because we have to provide electricity to X number of power
यस
subscribers, you know, and we can't go down because देखो, the business requirements dictates everything. What are
राइट
the business requirements, right? The business requirement dictates everything. अगर business requirement नहीं है, there is nothing. फिर तुम कैसे करोगे? I mean, how do you define, right? So, business requirements, they will mention market requirements, environmental requirements, social responsibility, everything, right? और उसको देखते हुए you decide what needs to be done.
राइट
ठीक है?
अच्छा फैसल भाई, रिगार्डिंग सिक्योरिटी लेवल टारगेट्स, जब जोन्स एंड कंट्रोल्स में कर लेते हैं, जब वो सेगमेंट हम कर लेते हैं, तो then we just go for security level targets. So how would we determine those security level targets for the zones and controls?
Again, everything is determined through risk assessment. So if the risk assessment says that ये जो zone है जहां पर HMI PLCs रखे हुए हैं, that's very important. या जहां historian रखा हुआ है, that's very important, right? So you need to define stringent controls over there. जहां sensors हैं और दूसरी चीजें हैं, वो level 0 है. You need less controls on level 0, but as you go up level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you need more controls, right? So it all depends on the level of the security zones, and that is determined by knowing the impact of that asset. If this asset goes down or if something happens to it, क्या impact होगा? The blast radius, the impact determines कि आपने कैसे controls लगाने, right? That's what you have to do. So everything is driven through GRC. In organizations, everything is driven through GRC. GRC will determine what needs to be done. यहाँ पर कोई विजय बैठा हुआ है. विजय, where are you from? विजय, कहाँ से हो भाई तुम? Can you say something? कहाँ से हो भाई विजय? विजय भाई, where are you from? अच्छा बताइए, और सवाल बताइए. Anything else?
Faisal bhai, regarding policies and procedures, what would be the best policies like that you, or can you please give me an example of policies that you have created previously regarding OT controls, OT assets, I mean?
देखो, वो सारी जो पॉलिसीज है ना, मैंने तुम्हें सब दी हुई है, स्टैंडर्ड्स दिए, सब है, उसको पढ़ लो. मैं रिपीट करूंगा, मैं थक गया हूँ. ठीक है ना?
ठीक है.
सो उसमें तुम्हें मैंने स्टैंडर्ड कॉपी भी दी थी ना, रिमेंबर? ठीक है ना?
हाँ फैसल भाई, मैंने
उसमें
go through
आईसी का एक
किया.
पूरा स्टैंडर्ड है कि जिसमें आपको ये पॉलिसीज चाहिए ओटी के लिए, बिकॉज आईसी 62443 डिजाइन ही ओटी के लिए हुआ है, राइट? It emphasizes more on OT, network security. This whole role is about OT network security. But don't say it to them. उनको जाके मत बोल देना वो 27001 यूज कर रहे हैं मतलब क्या ना उसको क्या नाम है ओटी के लिए.
फैसल भाई, आपने एक डॉक्यूमेंट मैपिंग दी थी 27001 की, तो वो जो है वो फॉलो करें इस टाइम.
मैंने तुम लोग को बहुत सारी चीजें दी हैं, अगर तुम लोग उसको सही तरह पढ़ लेते हो तो उसमें बहुत सारी चीजें कवर्ड.
नहीं फैसल भाई, मेरे पास है मतलब उसमें आपने सारी जो डॉक्यूमेंट पॉलिसी सारी वो दी हुई है उसमें, जो
हाँ हाँ
27001 में
हाँ
डॉक्यूमेंट
हाँ,
मैपिंग.
तुम उनसे बोल सकते हो. ठीक है ना? एक मिनट समय बताता हूँ.
इंफॉर्मेशन सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी है फैसल भाई, क्लाउड सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी है, रिस्क असेसमेंट, रिस्क ट्रीटमेंट मेथोडोलॉजी है, स्टेटमेंट ऑफ एप्लीकेबिलिटी है, ये सारी आपने दी हुई है.
ये तो देखो 27000 के ऊपर तो वो बात करेगा ही करेगा ना, वो तो उस पर बात करेगा. ठीक है ना? तो बोलो भाई the 27001 has 114 controls, right? I'm not talking about the ISMS. The ISMS requirement section 4, 5, 6, 7, 4 to 8 requirements are the key requirements for managing the ISMS, right? I'm not talking about that. That is a mandatory for us. पता नहीं ये कंपनी 27001 सर्टिफाइड है कि नहीं है, आई डोंट नो, चेक करना इसके ऊपर, ठीक है. But those are just generic requirements, right? But then for the OT aspects, the key policies that needs to be there are basically system segmentation, the network segmentation, the air gapping, defense in depth methodologies like putting IDS, IPS, air gapping, using firewall as gateways, right? So that everything is segmented as controlled, VLAN segmentation, user behavior analytics, many things. Then access controls, user identification, authentication, and authorization. How are we doing that? How does someone logs in remotely or on site? What things we have to follow? Implementing two-factor authentications, strong passwords, all of those kind of things, right? Patch management, biggest nightmare for OT. Patch management. We can't keep on patching everything. Sometimes we find vulnerabilities. It takes the vendor many months to give us a patch. What do we do during that time? Kya kare hum log? Segment the network. Put it segmented. Don't allow it to talk to other systems when it is not required. Don't put it on a flat network, right? Put in segmentation. Zero trust approach. Malware protection and intrusion detection, biggest issue. As we are looking into news and reading it all the time, what happened to colonial systems, what happened to different systems. Luckily, I haven't seen it because we did our job well, is if we could implement the controls properly, our systems won't be compromised. There won't be any ransomware attacks or other things penetrating into the systems. People, train the people. Logging and monitoring. One of the things that I'm testing nowadays is how to use AI, generative AI, to read the logs and continuously tells us what needs to be done, right? So that's another thing that I'm doing, and I'm doing some research, with a company that I just started. तो बताओ उनको AIOps के अंदर हम यही पढ़ा रहे हैं, generative AI को use करते हुए. वो generative क्या करेगा? वो logs पढ़ता रहेगा, बताएगा ओ यहाँ मसला होने वाला है, वो वहाँ मसला होने वाला है, मसला क्या होने वाला है, कैसे होगा, क्या होगा, सब बताएगा. That's what you have to do. Okay. Physical security, another big issue for OT. Device hardening, big problem. Most of these things are running on Linux or Windows or whatever, right? Some of these components have bare metal OS of Linux. How do we harden it? That's, for the application side, it's easy to use the CIS top 20 controls, but for other things, just disable the services, disable the ports, disable setting secure configurations, making sure that we have the right certificate installed in there. A lot of issues. Backup and recovery, another big problem. We need to make sure that we're taking regular backups, full backups, incremental backups, the full shebang, the whole 9 yards. Incident response. What happens if there's, how do we initiate the incidents? And that is something that we recommend. There's an ISO standard for incident response, 27,036 something, that 27,035 that we always recommend. But that's, I can design it, but normally that comes under the purview of the SOC, the Security Operations Center, the Network Operations Center. Vendor management, big problem. Training and awareness, risk assessment and management. These are the key aspects that I just mentioned from the OT side. From the IT side, access control, firewall configuration, router management, identity access management, backup and recovery, firewalls, malware detection, all those kinds of things. Like all the 114 controls. HR controls, physical controls, access controls, security policy, all of these things, they come in. बताओ आप, बस अच्छी तरह तैयारी करके जानी है तुमको, ठीक है. और अगर तुमसे पूछें कि भाई what happened, you left the organization and you moved on, बोलो भाई I needed a break, right? And I was working remotely for this company, but then I wanted to find a job in a company. If you're working in a consulting, you can only go so long, right? because it takes a toll on you. If you work at a consulting versus working here, it's day and night difference. Here it's easy. I'm telling you, it's easier. Over there, you have to manage 50 different client requirements. Here, I'm just managing one client. This is RWE, and I'm day and night, I'm just working to make sure that this customer is secure and compliant. Versus there, you know, every day you wake up, you see different things. It takes a toll on you. So I took some time off, and now I'm planning to go into the industry side so that I can use all the things I have learned over there. So after the Al-Nafi Cloud, I did a small gig, and now I'm back into the industry. During this time, I took some time off, refresh myself. Now I'm looking for the job, right? तो ये तुमने बताना है कि भाई गैप क्यों, और अब तुम्हारे सीवी में गैप नहीं होना चाहिए. Don't show any gap. Just बोलो कि मैं काम कर रहा हूँ, right? So ये तुमने दिखाना है. Anything else?
भाई वीजा की वजह से भी दिखाना थोड़ा सा वो जस्टिफाई मैं तो इसी तरह करता हूँ.
हाँ, बोलो कि हाँ सही है, बोलो कि ठीक है. I mean, अब तो मैं PSW पे हो गया. बोलो I have postgraduate work permit here. I'm allowed to work in UK full time for any employer. You know, I don't need anything. सही है.
हाँ फैसल भाई, मैं पहले उनको ये कहता हूँ कि पहले मेरे पास वो नहीं था, जो है मतलब परमिट नहीं थी मेरे पास, अब आ गई है, तो इसी वजह से मुझे छोड़ना पड़ी जॉब की वजह.
हाँ बोलो. मैं otherwise I was very happy. मैं बहुत खुश था. ठीक है ना. तो अब मुझे जगह देखनी कि मैं कहाँ घुस सकता हूँ. That's it. ठीक है भाई.
ठीक है फैसल भाई.
चलो जाओ, अल्लाह ताला से दुआ करो, अल्लाह ताला तुम्हारे लिए आसानी के मामलात फरमाए. मेहनत करो, अच्छी तरह सब चीजें मेमोराइज करके जाना ताकि तुम्हारे सारे काम हो जाए. ठीक है, इंशाल्लाह.
अच्छा
चलो,
अच्छा.
सुब्हानक अल्लाहुम्मा व बिहम्दिका अशहदु अल्ला इलाहा इल्ला अंता अस्तगफिरुका व अतूबु इलैक. अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाह. पता नहीं यहाँ पर कोई विजय साहब बैठे हुए थे, पता नहीं कौन थे, couldn't figure out. ठीक है ना, मैंने उनको बुलाया भी, बट एनीवे, थैंक यू. अल्लाह हाफिज.